All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Spirited Conversation with Lou Bryson, Liz Rhoades, Marty Duffy, and this week, a very special guest, Bill Welter from Journeyman Distillery is here, which is very exciting. So I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co, and real quickly, before I turn things over to your hosts, I just want to point out a couple of ways you can interact with them over the course of the live stream. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Please say hello. Let us know where you're joining from. We'd love to see that. Above it, you'll see a share button, which you can use to invite your friends, colleagues to come join us, hang out, ask questions. And on that note, if you do want to ask a question, you'll see the Ask a Question box at the bottom of your screen. So submit your questions there at any point. And we will get to them at the end of the presentation. I know they set some time aside to do a little Q&A. So with that said, Lou, Liz, Marty, I will turn it over to y'all now. Take it away.
Woohoo! Hi, everyone.
Howdy.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here again to talk important stuff. My name is Martin Duffy. I'm a former master of whiskey, senior master of whiskey, please. For Diageo, former, notice there's going to be a lot of formers. Former national brand ambassador for Benedictine, former co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo, but current national brand ambassador, brand representative for Glencairn Crystal. Hello, Liz.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm Liz Rhoades, a technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, worked across a couple different substrates and categories, such as beer, rum, vodka, but certainly my favorite, I think my co-host would agree, whiskey. Currently, I am founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting, where I specialize in technical process and quality support, product development, innovation, and spirit education. And with that, I'll kick it over to Lou.
Lou Bryson. Thank you, Liz. I am the former managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine. I was there for about 20 years. Been writing about beer and whiskey since the mid-90s. I have a book out in 2014 that's done pretty well, Tasting Whiskey. And I have my new book, Whiskey Masterclass, which just came out in February.
Oh, my God.
Thank you. I love you guys.
These are the best
Bill,
book
I should have got you a book. I'm sorry.
I have
And I'm currently a senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast. I write about beer and whiskey for them, and actually did an aquavit piece for them as well. Come to think of it, damn glad to be here.
Woohoo! And then, of course, we have our special guest, a man who needs no.
Are we calling him a guest? I thought we were calling him a hostage. Are we going with guest? Okay, all right.
No one can see the chains around his ankles. Yes, a man who needs no introduction. So, anyways, Bill Welter for Journeyman Distillery. A man's built an empire in the southwest of Michigan. You can't even go past there without paying him tolls.
Great to be here with you and Liz and Lou and such a esteemed group. Everything I know about whiskey, I read in Lou's book, Tasting Whiskey and Whiskey Masterclass. So, really shout out to Lou there.
It's amazing. You mean you
Wow.
built that distillery 10 years ago? And you were waiting for Lou's book to come out?
We've got his book for sale here. I'm not kidding.
Very
All right.
Book signing, as soon as all this stuff is over, book signing.
We have no customers anymore. I'm sorry, Lou.
Yeah, well, the same story everywhere.
Hey, Bill, I actually, a little transparency, I actually interviewed Bill for Glencairn. Glencairn's doing a thing called Glassroom on our website where we interview various distillers. Sweet, yeah, we. No, Liz? Mother. Yeah. Mother. Lou, we gotta talk about this. Anyways, I found it fascinating. I've always found it fascinating. I've known some of this, but it was great getting more details when I talked to you. Tell us a little bit about how your little journey, as in journeyman, how your little journey into becoming, one, a whiskey lover, and then building a distillery, and tell us more about that distillery, because it's a great place to visit.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I guess I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. But as a younger guy, in my early 20s, I spent some time living in Scotland, and actually, the game of golf took me there. I played golf in college, and after graduating from university, I thought I wanted to learn more about the history of the game. So I went to Scotland on a work visa, spent 18 months there working as a waiter in a restaurant, and tried to learn more about the game and play as much as I could during that period. But little did I know I was actually going there to get a lesson on whiskey. Working in a restaurant in St. Andrews, became very good friends with the head bartender there, who classified himself as his own master of whiskey. Looking back on that now, I think that just meant he was good at drinking it. The guy's name.
Every man his own master.
Yeah, that's right. His name was Greg Ramsey. Greg and I became good friends. And we both left St. Andrews in 2001 to pursue other things. But he opened a small distillery in Tasmania in 2006. At the time, I was working for my dad in our family business, and just thought, well, that's amazing. That's super cool. Not really even, knowing that you could open a small distillery in the U.S. at that time in 2006. As I'm sure you guys can tell me more, but it was mainly the major distilling brands. So to hear that someone was actually opening a distilling operation was pretty incredible to me. And lo and behold, our family business was sold not long after, and in 2010, I went to Tasmania to work at Greg's distillery with the intent of coming back and opening a small distillery here in the United States. So I spent.
What's the name of his distillery, Bill?
Actually, it's defunct now. It's no longer in existence.
Sorry,
that's a good name for a distillery these days.
Yeah,
defunct.
Yeah, the distillery is called Nant, N-A-N-T, and Greg was actually conceived the idea and had some ownership in it, but actually he got the distillery up and running for a primary investor, who later on, after Greg's involvement, ended up, unfortunately for him, running the business into the ground. So I learned a tremendous amount there, and really probably the most time I spent was actually at Lark Distillery with Bill and some of his team. And actually was fortunate enough just recently to get back to Tasmania and saw Bill and his daughter and kind of reminisced about 10 years ago when I was there last.
Speaking of which, your love of Scotland has two very noticeable signs over at your distillery. One, your little daughter, your own daughter, is named Isla.
Yeah,
to the Isle of Isla, and you have a putting green, 18-hole putting green that's based on that, like a miniature St. Andrews.
Yeah, so I'll comment on both those things. Our daughter, obviously, I think my number one goal when I started Journeyman was to create a multi-generational family-owned and operated business. My wife and I still own the business entirely, and I had an opportunity to travel to Isla when I lived in St. Andrews, and just thought it was amazing, not only for the whiskey, but just the sheer beauty. So I guess Isla is born into the whiskey business here, and whether she likes it or not, hopefully she'll to work with mom and dad down the road here. And then the putting green is a 30,000 square foot putting green. I'm lucky enough to have a very good friend of mine, Craig Haltom, who is a golf course architect and contractor. And over maybe one too many Journeyman Last Feather rye whiskeys, I was able to convince him to build a putting green here in Three Oaks, right behind our distillery. As I mentioned, it's 30,000 square feet. And it's a near replica to the Himalaya putting green, which is in St. Andrews and has been around since the mid-1800s as kind of a community putting course. And that's ours is free for kids. We want to get kids involved in playing golf, but let's be honest, just being outside and off their iPads for a while. And then adults obviously can play as well.
Yeah, and at a distillery. That's what kids should be.
Yeah.
Off their iPads and at a distillery.
Yep.
What was the oh no, wait. I had a great question for you based on that.
We'll wait.
Anyways, no, go ahead. Anyone else? Quick. My brain is going through a redial.
Tell us more about the whiskey, Bill. That's what I'm here for.
That's what I was going to say.
Hold on. What page 37 of Masterclass? Hold on.
Talk about the fact that you, before your distillery was built, you actually made your first whiskey. Your Ravenswood rye was made at Caval, which is on Ravenswood Avenue here in Chicago. But then what happened to the name?
Yeah, so back in, after I got back from Tasmania, I learned a hell of a lot, but I felt like I needed more experience. So I contacted Robert at Caval and said, we're looking to open a distillery in Michigan sometime in 2011. And what if I paid you to hang around with your distillery for a period of time? I'm probably the last guy that paid a fair amount of money to hang out with Robert. He's a great guy. We have a great relationship to this day, and still, bounce ideas off each other. But he said sure, and I spent basically the summer of 2010 hanging around Caval, and we distilled what seemed like a lot of whiskey at the time, but it was only 300 or 400 gallons, and put that in barrel, and with the idea of having an aged rye whiskey when we opened our doors on day one at Journeyman in Three Oaks, Michigan. So, of course, as Marty alluded to, we submitted that rye to the San Francisco World Spirits Competition in 2012. And I think that was the first competition we ever entered. We won gold medal for it. And no less than 2 weeks later, just a second. Hey, guys. Sorry, guys. I'm in the middle of the production area. And in 2012, 2 weeks after winning gold medal, we received a cease and desist order from Constellation Brands. And they had a trademark on the use of Ravenswood dating back to 1972.
Bill,
So,
you can use that. That's my middle name, is Ravenswood. So you can name it after me.
We've had our fair share of trademark issues, to be honest. We had one that actually preceded that when we opened our distillery. I thought, well, there's kind of this age-old tradition of naming a product after the owner or the distiller. So our first unaged whiskey, I was going to call it W.L. Welter.
Yeah, no problem there.
So our old friends at Rack, who I have great respect for and love their whiskey, sent me a nice little one-pager suggesting that maybe that was a little too similar to W.L. Weller. So before we even got out of the gate with that one, that was before we even opened the door. They had seen our label come through, colas on the TTB. And so we just, said, well, we've never even sold a bottle of this. We might as well just change the name. The name's not worth a heck of a lot. So I guess that's where we are with that.
Bill, we have a question for you from, I believe it's Mr. Wilson Torres from Chicago, Illinois. Young Wilson from Union Horse Whiskey. He's asking, are you still using 30-gallon barrels, or are your more popular expressions in 53s?
Almost everything that we're releasing right now is in 30 gallons, aged for 3 years or longer. And we've been aggressively trying to transition into larger format barrels, 3-gallon barrels, not necessarily because we don't like the flavor profile that's coming out of the 30s, but more of a decision in economics. If we can get whiskey into 53s for 5 years or longer, that barrel cost per gallon goes down quite a bit. And, with the assumption that the whiskey quality isn't going to suffer, that may actually maybe even get better in 53s over a longer period of time. So we've been transitioning into 53s, and we're about 2 years out from just being all 53s.
Oh, wow. Liz, did you have a question?
I did. So it's kind of back to your naming. So I had some real questions about the corset whips and whiskey. What's that about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we just won best of category for the corsets, whips, and whiskey, which is 100 in the ADI tasting event that just results were just released a few weeks back. But so we're proud of that. So corsets, whips, and whiskey, we are located in an old 1800s factory building where where they used to manufacture corsets and buggy whips. No kidding. And now, of course, whiskey is the essential ingredient to that party. So
is there a Venn diagram that we should know about?
Yeah, so the corsets, we make 2 wheat whiskeys. One is, they're both 100% wheat. One is called Buggy Whip, and that's our 90 proof expression. And then the corsets, whips, and whiskey is the cast strength version. So the proof kind of bouncing around a bit.
And to top things off, who was the guy who originally owned that building?
So the guy who founded his business here making corsets and buggy whips, his name was E.K. Warren. And Warren, as it turns out, was a huge prohibitionist. So actually, Warren had tremendous success. The corsets, believe it or not, back in the 1800s, were practically as common as blue jeans are today. And so they had been manufactured from whalebone.
Yeah.
It was really
intense.
It was really expensive. So when Warren used the quill of a turkey feather to make a product that replaced the whalebone, he basically was. I mean, if you came up with something today that revolutionized the blue jean, is kind of the equivalent to it. So he was a man in the 1800s.
He was the Jordache of corsets.
But he hated whiskey, Marty. He wanted to abolish it. In fact, he had created his own prohibition in Three Oaks, Michigan. The town was dry for over 55 years under the Warrens.
You and Paul Heltko should get together.
Right.
Yes.
People say he's rolling over at his grave. I mean, what can I do about it?
He can't. Corsets.
You couldn't hook him up to a generator. Turn it over that fast.
Well,
all right.
Congrats on the award.
Yeah, congrats, Bill. Bill, is there anything else you want to talk about the distillery before we move on?
Oh, no, I mean, when I mentioned the ADI, it just made me think back to calling Bill Owens, I think in late 2009, and saying, what do you think about this distilling thing? And, at the time, I think, people thought, well, this could be a good idea, but maybe not. And we just kind of went forward with it. And I remember Bill is kind of like, I guess, straight out of Nike's playbook. He told me, just do it. And I've never forgotten that. And he and I were corresponding a couple of weeks back, and I just said, "You remember when you told me that?" And now look, we're closed.
Oh God!
We aren't really closed, but obviously with the pandemic, our restaurant is closed here in Michigan. We have 3 event spaces. We do quite a few weddings and different events, and those are obviously on hold temporarily. But the liquors, our little retail shop here is open for the time being, and obviously you can still find Journeyman in distribution.
So people can still, yeah, that's right. People can buy Journeyman spirits at your local store, and you're available in most states.
We're in 19 states. We have a little where to find mechanism on our website where you can see where we're distributed and what stores carry us.
And then people can drop by and pick up both whiskey, spirits, and hand sanitizer, correct, Mundo?
Yeah, we're having people come by. I mean, practicing social distancing and all that, but it's nice to see. It's nice to see people. It's sometimes, I guess, in some ways, you don't know how good you had it, and then something like this comes along, and it's been a real.
There is a link for everyone watching. Yeah, there's a link to the Journeyman Distillery below. So please check that out. Now we welcome young Bill to join us in the lively art of conversation. I guess it's 4 fingers.